Hello, Alexander.
Hello, Andrew.
I just wanted to tell everybody I'm drinking wine tonight to see how it affects my podcasting performance.
Brilliant. And it's red wine. And
Red wine because I
live in France.
Avon, France, yes.
Yeah. So whatever we do in our lives, you and I, we will definitely grow together with tons of red wine and goose liver pate on the coast of Italy and France.
There you go.
Life could not be any better.
What else do you need?
Yeah.
Okay.
My co-writer Jan Söderqvist has already moved to Tuscany, so there you go. And the better your life is, the darker your books will become. When you're sad, if you're a songwriter, you write happy songs. And when you're happy, you write sad songs.
That's so fucking true.
I think it's the same thing for philosophy. The funniest, quirkiest philosopher I met had the darkest possible philosophy. Like a guy like Nick Land, for example, this sort of legendary guy who's in hiding in China today and is the accelerationist, Deleuzian, alt-right guy, or whatever they call him. He's one of the funniest guys I've ever met. Love him to bits. Whereas, the very serious, more dark, moody people usually have a more positivist attitude towards life, like analytic philosophers coming out of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, they're very moody. Yeah. So I'm a happy guy. So there you go. I'm going to write really fierce, tough books. How about you?
I'm melancholic, but by nature, I'm a deeply melancholic person. But I also have a kind of mischievous, kind of playful, kind of. I like to fool around.
You're hiding your melancholy pretty well, Andrew.
Really?
Yeah, you're funny. You're a really sweet, funny guy. This guy, for those of you who are watching this, is a great friend to go out and get drunk with. So cheers to the red wine.
I like to go out and get drunks. I like this a state of intoxication. I think it's.
Hey, you left Canada for France and married a Polish woman. It's not like you're avoiding alcohol, right?
Yeah. Except she does. But anyway, yeah.
All right. So where are we at? We're at
the garden. The city of God and the tower.
The garden of God, the city of God, and the tower of God.
Okay.
These are the theological names of the utopias we're working on at the moment for the forthcoming Exodus project. You and I are working on them here. Anybody who likes to get involved, please do. We'll credit you richly if you contribute to this project. And I'm writing the book at the moment. Jan Söderqvist is probably going to take me another 3 to 4 years to finish writing the book. But these are the names of the 3 utopias we are sort of sketching going forward over, say, 20 to 30,000 years of humanity on this planet. So what I did the other day was that I had a long private Zoom conversation with the eminent Jan Vervaeke.
Right.
We love this guy to bits, don't we? Right.
Indeed, yeah.
And you're in a way the bridge between the two of us, Andrew, because you're like, I call you a Tibetan Buddhist. I know you don't like the Tibetan, but Vajrayana Buddhist. So, but
no, I'm a tantric Buddhist. I'm not a Tibetan Buddhist. I keep saying that because I'm not like Richard Gere,
No, I know, but that's the Tibetans own the name Tibet, not Richard Gere.
Fair enough.
He's just an American Buddhist. That's different.
Yeah, but Vervaeke, I'm going through his videos with a fine-tooth comb and writing them, trying to digest them and write.
So
I've written about 10.
We cannot recommend this guy too much. Like you got 46 or 47 episodes of eminent lectures, and Jan Vervaeke is one of the most learned men on the planet. He's one of the world's leading cognitive scientists. He's a professor at the University of Toronto, Canada, and Toronto is now officially the capital of brain power in North America. Yeah. Can we agree on that, right?
Yeah, and as you say,
Toronto's the place. Yeah,
even his besides all of his credentials, he's a sweet guy, and you can
yes,
a sincere person like who doesn't have a pretentious bone in his body. I think he's a great guy. Yeah.
He's a great guy. So he's one of our allies. He also talks openly about that. He's in constant conversation with guys like you and me. So what has happened is that John sort of zoomed in on the fact that I'm talking about phallic vision all the time. And that's what I'm writing about. We all Söderqvist, and you and I are discussing it here in our Zoom conversations. But what is happening in Europe is that Alenka Štepancic released a book called What is Sex? And she's a very funny Slovenian female philosopher. And Alenka wrote on the top of the book, she wrote that probably the least sexy book you'll ever read. Right? Which is very Slovene and very laconic, right? Then you really need to read the book, right? It's a brilliant book, by the way. So I recommend Alenka Štepancic, What is Sex? Then Jan Söderqvist and I come along and write a book called Digital Libido, Sex, Power, and Violence in the Network Society. And then Slavoj Žižek has released this new, by the way, formidable new book. Slavoj's new book is called Sex and the Failed Absolute, where a great friend of ours, Adrian Johnston, I think it is Adrian at least, the American professor, the greatest American Lacanian today, has written the foreword and probably helped Slavoj put together this book. So it's like Slavoj Žižek's philosophy into one book, Sex and the Failed Absolute. Now, with these three books, it looks like the Europeans are pretty sex obsessed at the moment, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Maybe that is because the Americans are ignoring the issue of sexuality altogether. Okay, the way it works is this. Sexuality is like drive in itself. It's a fundamental drive. And the way it works is that it's never balanced, never harmonious. You never reach what you wanted. Desire escapes you all the time, and the drive is never pleased. So sexuality reminds us that the world is never whole. It's never put together. It's always out of joint. Mm-hmm. This is where Slavoj Žižek and I and all the Hegelians and Freudians agree, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a European perspective maybe, but it's unavoidable. And if you're sort of an American post-Christian or some kind of, light Buddhist or something who avoids sexuality altogether, you end up looking a bit like a little boy or a little girl dreaming about the world. You're not a really proper philosopher. You can't avoid the topic of sexuality to begin with. Like I said to John the other day, is that these conversations having now with Jordan Hall, for example, are great when it comes to cognitive science and computer science, and therefore also the relationship between man and machine in the future. The way we should look at Vervaeke and Hall and what they're doing right now is that they're pointing out a cognitive science, computer science field where man and machine collaborations could be really, really powerful. I expect North America to deliver on that one. So that's great. But when we talk of philosophy, like the bigger picture, like the grand narratives and all that, they're going to be narratives by humans for humans. All they're talking about constantly is the will to intelligence, as I call it. They're not talking about the will to transcendence. And the will to transcendence, like to transcend, to create something better than what we have, or solve our major problems in the world once and for all, if you want to put it that way. That is the will to transcendence, and that's nothing about the machines. Machines don't want anything. They're just basically happy slaves to us, hopefully. So we need to think about what it does mean to be human and what do humans communicate with humans to create a human narrative here. And that's the content you and I are talking about all the time. So while they're building a container, if you're being a bit nasty to Vervaeke and Hall and talk about the religion without religion, then I would expect the Chinese Communist Party to call them soon, because they're actually creating a perfect container for them as well. It's basically a perfect container for anybody who wants to fill up a container with some content. So you got to start talking about the content sooner or later, and you cannot avoid the content. But if you're going to talk about the content, you cannot avoid three things. You cannot avoid Marx and class analysis. You cannot avoid Nietzsche and power analysis. That includes Foucault, for example. And you can certainly not avoid Freud and sexuality, which also means that any system you sort of create or fantasize about in a Platonist way will fall apart instantly, because that's the lesson from Hegel is that the Platonist fantasies will never hold, because sexuality will make sure they're all blown up eventually. So what you can do is temporarily create an emergent platform of some kind from which you can achieve greater things. Okay. Yeah. Now, how do you go about doing this? And this is where it gets interesting. You and I have talked a lot about the child, the adult, and the God. Right?
Yep.
Now, when you listen to Vervaeke, he talks about the child, the adult, and the sage. He's creating a religion without a religion. It's like he wants to avoid the God word. He wants to avoid anything remotely close to that. Probably because Vervaeke has an upbringing in fundamentalist Christianity in North America. It's a very common traumatic experience for North American thinking.
Well, he said in his lecture that he didn't mind using the word sacred, but he didn't like using the word like divine, or he doesn't like any of these like. Yeah,
you and I love those words.
Religious words. Well, personally, I want to speak. I want to use, let's say, romantic language to describe things. Not romantic in a cheesy sense, but poetic language, or
sure,
not just this very dry, analytical stuff.
Yeah, but the point is here. While Vervaeke and Hall discuss a religion without religion, we look at it the other way around. We're basically saying we've had religion without religion for way too long.
Right.
We need proper religion. What are we afraid of? Why are we afraid of God? Why are we afraid of religion? These are just words to begin with. What were they originally? How have they been defined since then? What has been projected on these words then, later? And can we go back to the original etymological, genealogical meaning, and could they make sense to us today? Okay, so what is the difference between child, adult, and sage? And child, adult, and God?
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between those two chains? And obviously,
well, sage is more of a humanized notion, isn't it?
yes, it's a priest, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so maybe there are four. Maybe we should combine the two. And then you get child, adult, priest, God.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, that means the child aspires, if the phallic transition has worked at 1 year of age, as Freud says, then the child aspires to one day be an adult, and they should stay within that realm. That's childhood. Okay, you don't want to interfere with that. If you throw anything too adult into the child's world too early, you have pornography for 3-year-olds and you have computer war games for 2-year-olds or whatever. You don't want to do that, right? So children are allowed to be children, okay, to aspire to become adults. The adult can then, according to Vervaeke correctly, aspire to become like a sage, priest. Because not to become a sage, but to become something similar or mimic, because the sage inspires the adult to be more independent, stronger, more responsible, be a stronger adult. Go from a young, self-obsessed adult towards somebody caring, larger, an adult who has wisdom.
I would say a sage sort of dismantles the ego and also provides encouragement and to construct something.
Especially today, because we have narcissism as a massive problem in young people. So the sage or the priest is the third step. Now, the priest can aspire for the divine. And this is the interesting thing. In any culture outside of contemporary Western culture, you would be very adamant that these 4 steps you have to go through them. So the child cannot aspire to be a sage, and the child must certainly not aspire to be a god, because that's when disaster strikes. So the problem, though, is that while that is wisdom, I would say that is historical wisdom to actually go through those 4 stages and look at them separately. Meaning, there's something mistaken about a culture where we believe we have a direct access to God, right? Because we don't. The priest do. We go to the priest. The priest is access.
I totally agree.
To go through the priest.
It's a gradual, step-by-step, process.
That's why sort of individualist religion freaks people out, because that's what Catholicism has saints. Polytheism is essentially just a recognition that there's a step between adult and God, and that step is called the priest or the sage. So you go to the priest. For the priest talks to the God, you talk to the priest. And when the priest dies, the priest, if it's a great priest, becomes a saint. It's a go-between function, right? That's important, because otherwise we do not have a chain that actually explains how wisdom emerges and where you can find wisdom. So if Vervaeke takes a cognitive scientific approach towards wisdomy on top of rationality, which in turn is on top of intelligence, then we would probably say, no, we take intelligence separately, and we can then nurture intelligence immensely with machines and things, but we take transcendence as the other will, and transcendence is to aspire to get higher through the hierarchy and reach towards the divine. Okay?
And what do machines have to do with transcendence?
We can leave. No, they don't. No. They have to do with intelligence. Machines can be intelligent.
So you're separating those two things. That's
Okay. Let's go back and see how that works with Aristotelian causes. So we have the formal cause, we have the material cause, we have the efficient cause, and the final cause in Aristotle. And we talked a lot about the return to causality is incredibly important today. Now, what would those 4 things be today? We would probably say formal cause is architecture. We can have a plan, right? Drawing. What are we going to do, right? Formal cause goes into material cause, which is where's the building material? What are we going to build this from? Where have we dug out the material or the ideas and everything that we can build something on, right? It can be a book like a Bible. It can be building like a temple. It doesn't matter. Same principles. The third one is efficient cause. How do we put this to life? We throw blood or energy or electricity or water or something through the system, so it becomes a system that has a flow that goes through it, so change starts occurring within the system. That's efficient cause for you. Now, the 4th and last one is final cause. And what the Greeks share with today's Americans is that they're very, very scared of sexualizing the cosmos. So, okay, maybe then final cause, what pulls us forward as if it was there already. But
Mhm.
it basically, you throw the idea into the future, and that will then pull you forward. It's not like there's something there to pull you there. That's
Mhm.
why God is not something that exists. It's a concept you throw forward and you strive towards it. And because of that, you will walk in the right direction and end up in the promised land.
Mhm. Okay.
So if we sexualize the final cause, God forbid we can, then we have two final causes. One of them is the matrical final cause, the matrical circular religion that,
Mhm.
Buddhism and Christianity would enjoy. That's called the will to intelligence. It's not surprising Jordan Hall and Jan Vervaeke are American Buddhists. It's not surprising at all. You would expect Buddhists or sort of post-Christian Christians today to be obsessed with matrical stuff. So they would think about out of something, if you just sit together and have a conversation, something magical will emerge out of that. That will solve the problem. They will always go for a solution to problems that are increased intelligence will solve the problem. So if
Mhm.
machines become more intelligent, if the machines then foster the best out of us, so we become more intelligent, you're moving towards something that Daniel Schmachtenberg beautifully calls symbiotic intelligence. We're all for this. We don't have a problem with this project. This
Mhm.
product is right for cognitive science. It's right for computer science. It's right for the machine learning professors of the world today. Anything you explore in terms of man-machine relationships, this is great stuff. That's why I expect that to come out of North America because the groundwork is down there ready by Vervaeke, Hall, and these other guys. Perfect.
Yeah.
But the other one is the will to transcendence. That's the phallic one. And that's why they sort of eerie about our talk about the phallic vision.
Yeah.
And even Vervaeke gets this now. He's just like, all right, so will to transcendence, well, machines don't want to transcend. They have no idea what that means. They can't even crack a joke. They don't comprehend. They're not
Yeah.
human. So we human beings are the ones who are left with the will to transcend. And the will to transcend is precisely this hierarchy, where the child wants to become an adult. The adult wants to become more like the sage. And the sage obviously aspires towards the divine.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, what we
Great.
did though in the West is that in the 5th century, we split up church and state. And we did so by instead of going for two religions, a phallic and a matrical one, like Zoroastrianism and Buddhism, you and I, Vervaeke, agree, perfect combo. Vajrayana Buddhism is even the merger of the two. So Zoroastrianism and Buddhism, phallic religion, matrical religion, perfectly match each other. Two different religions that actually are compatible. They complement each other. The problem with the West was that we could have gone possibly from Mithraism, which was the military religion of the Roman Empire, and Christianity in parallel, but the Christians weren't happy with that. And also the Roman Empire only had one emperor. It was a dictatorship. So they went for Christianity. What then happened was that the Gnosticism built into Christianity from St. Augustine played out. And that meant there was a conflict between spirit and body throughout society. That means spirit is owned by church. Body rematerializes something secular in the state. The problem with that is that you and I agree that everything should be religion.
Yeah.
Söderqvist and I wrote a book called Syntheism, Creating God in the Internet Age. The first chapter is called Everything is Religion. And it says explicitly in a sentence, everything is religion. And if it pretends not to be religion, it's either dead, hopefully, or dangerous.
Or it's a pseudo-religious ideology, to quote John Vervaeke. Yeah.
Well, pseudo-religious ideologies are usually religions and should be actually held accountable for being religious. I think that's better. Okay. So what happens is that the West, as we know it, and I say the Mediterranean West, I include the Middle East and Europe because they've traded, they've been part of the same system. The Abrahamic faiths are very intertwined with one another, but it became to be dominated not by some Jewish mysticism, it became to be dominated by Gnostic religion. And the Gnostic religion has two different ways out. Christianity eventually developed into a church that's separate from the state, constantly fighting with one another over hegemony in society, right? Whereas Islam, which was run by a warlord, Muhammad, one of the best warlords ever, he's one of the best, without a doubt, one of the best warriors ever. I mean, he conquered half the world in no time at all. But when it comes to religion itself, it's basically a simplistic, childish, simplified version of Zoroastrianism. That's what Islam is. It was basically built by Persians who wanted to conquer and override the Persian Empire, which was ruled by Zoroastrian Mohammeds. And the struggle between Zoroastrian and Islam eventually was won by the Muslims because their religion was more simple, more militaristic, more aggressive, and more short-sighted. So they went out and conquered half the world, took the Middle East, that became Islam. We were left with Christianity in Europe. Two Gnostic religions took over the West. The wars we've had ever since in the West, the conflicts had ever since in the West, are obviously related to the lack of religion in these systems, not the abundance of it.
Or maybe it's the lack of, like you say, there are the two forces, the matriarchal and the patriarchal, working together.
Lack of wisdom. Wisdom is religion. Religion tells you that you cannot do this when you're 20, and you cannot do this even when you're 30. You may be able to do this when you're 40, and if you live to 50, then we'll congratulate you because you're ready for it.
Yeah,
that is a wisdom. I don't know if
there's no life stages or something in the
no
secular world.
Religion gives us the journey. It says that you're born here, you'll die there. The road from when you're born until you die is your journey as a member of a tribe. The tribe is way more important than you are. You'll go through these different phases. Your biology will do this to you at certain stages. We will react to that biology in certain ways. And because we've done this for tens of thousands of years, the elders know what to do with you. Now, that is nomadology. The original religion worked like that because we were basically nomads for hundreds of thousands of years. That was all blown up 5,000 years ago. We created permanent settlements because you were no longer moving in the flesh. So we started moving in the ideas. And an idea like Plato's vision of the world could never have occurred in a nomadic tribe.
Yeah, sure.
You need a place like Egypt, and you need a boy pharaoh who's 11 years old and who has a boy's penis and has no idea what it's like to be a fully grown-up man, have a grown-up man's penis. So he has these fantasies. And if you ask children what they fantasize about when they're projecting it onto adults, they have a fantasy about gods and goddesses, right? So if you tell an 11-year-old boy he's an adult and he has no idea what it means to be an adult, he will think he's a god. And if you call him a pharaoh, he will be encouraged to be a god. And you get madness. That's why the pharaohs built pyramids. The most useless constructions ever. Grown-up men build trade routes. That's used. The Silk Route is the total opposite of the pyramid. The Silk Route is the most wonderful construction humanity ever made, the most sustainable and the biggest construction ever made. And we need the trade routes again today more than ever, but we do not need pyramids, and we do. So
they don't just build empty monuments. They build actual sort of utility into their.
Yeah, you and I've discussed it before. Whenever we got the boy who thinks he's a god, we get the Hitlers and the Stalins and the boy pharaohs and all these idiots of the world. That's when we get idiocy instead of wisdom. Because if the boy is told you're only a boy and you're not a man yet, and one day you might be a man, you might go through the initiation ritual, and we might see something useful in you, and if you don't, we'll probably kill you and throw you out or whatever. But you must strive for the next step on the transcendent, on the hierarchy of transcendence. This is will to transcendence. And this is where the phallic comes in, because the phallus is the symbol of what makes us want to get higher. So the phallus is the symbol because the female body tells, the motherly body tells, the matrix and mamilla symbolize where we came from and what supports us. So it's not part of our future. It's part of the past and the present. The future is always the phallus. It's like Lacan would say, it is the ultimate object petit. Well, petit, I would just say object, but it's the ultimate object of our desires that we strive for but never seem to achieve. Okay? Right. So what happens in the West is that not only do we have the separate state, we then get the printing press. With the printing press arises the idea that if you open a sacred book, which are now affordable, and you read it, then you're the most clever guy ever. And we encourage tons and tons of people to think that they're divine all of a sudden. And we get individualism, which is a religion that says that you are divine. And in case of Protestantism, it is that you have direct access to God without effort. And you can ask God for forgiveness at any given time. And no matter what you do, like plunder the earth, exploit everything that's there, you can just ask God for forgiveness, and the church will give it to you in return for some money. That's European Christianity. No wonder we exploited the planet and plundered everything. If you look at it from the 5th century going forward, and then the printing press encouraging individualism, and now with the internet encouraging children to think they're gods everywhere, it's madness, because we get mass infantilization and mass narcissism and no wisdom. Yeah. It's madness. And America, coming out of the Second World War in 1945, and the old Europe has blown itself apart. Patriarchy was lost. There was a very confused matriarchy left in Europe. The patriarchs are gone because they've blown their heads out, essentially. And Europe was left with some confused women, and American soldiers came along. America, of course, being completely steeped in the culture of individualism and Protestantism, was a culture completely worshiping youth.
Yeah.
No wisdom. So we got James Dean and Marilyn Monroe as the new saints. And they killed themselves because of it, right? They weren't gods. They were just kids, right? We projected onto them the divine.
Right.
And since then, we have sexualized the young female body, and now we sexualize the young male body. And we have a completely over-sexualized society, drenched in pornography, literal pornography too. And now it's also social pornography. And it's getting desperate to the point of that, like when you're young, when you're 20, you're at the peak of your life, you must expose yourself to everybody, and you're like the king of the world, the queen of the world, which is ridiculous. You know nothing when you're 20.
Yeah.
So this whole movement towards back to wisdom that we're seeing Anglo-Saxon cultures, England, America, that you and I are pursuing here in Europe. Certainly the same thing is happening in Asia. I just came back from a tour in India. They're looking at the same thing. The same thing's going on in East Asia. This whole return to wisdom is a desperate call for getting rid of this sort of Americanized Western youth worship culture and the idea that you can instantly have access to God and instantly have access to wisdom, although you've done nothing.
Okay, I have a question for you about that.
Yeah.
Art and aesthetics, and I wrote that down actually because I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
What does that look like in a world that is doesn't have this American youth culture, pop culture?
Well,
it dominates everything these days. What would art look like? What would art be? It would be participatory, probably more, and
yes,
and it would be what would it look like?
Tribally produced, subculturally produced, definitely. We are so sick and tired of the individual, and we don't want artists that are brands. Even Banksy's tired of it, right? He's tried to be the anti-brand in a funny way. Probably that's why he's the world's greatest artist today, because he's just tried to avoid the narcissism that is so prevalent today. I think artists today are no longer artistes, they're auteurs, they're no longer individuals who are geniuses. Just like fashion design is over as well. The fashion designer is gone. All these Napoleonic characters are gone, by the way, anyway. So we are moving into the tribal subcultural, where teams of people working with machines create amazing things like art. I would say that a Netflix series, the way it's produced today, is the first good example of that. You first do tons of data on possible customers out there that we're interested in watching and following this series you're creating, and you're creating a script out of them, and you have to challenge them. You have to flatter them, but also challenge them, make them laugh and cry, whatever, as you would do with any good narrative. And you put on the performance on that sort of theatrical stage that Netflix series is today. But the Netflix series are written with way more machine intelligence involved than the old Hollywood movies were. That's why I also nail it much better now.
But isn't there still...
That's art. That's art. That's where art is moving.
Can I push you back just a little bit here?
Yeah.
Isn't there still a kind of, like, let's say, George, what's his name, Martin or something? Isn't there some individual genius usually behind a great work of art, or is that just an illusion?
That's an illusion. There always was an illusion. We were told in the 19th century that they were geniuses. The French word for that is auteur. That is a result of Cartesian individualism too. You have to understand that we've lived ingrained in a religion called Cartesian individualism for the past 400 years. It became the American religion.
But isn't there a singularity sometimes to certain people? And I don't know.
No, we're sick of it. Everything from now on is teams and collaborations that return to the gang. The tribe, the subcultural cultural output comes from community.
Isn't there usually a leader in the tribe who kind of is the one that shines the most, or who's
no?
Okay.
That whole shining the most thing is individualism again. Stop looking for Descartes in everything. Give up on Descartes. It's dead. Descartes is where we don't want to go. And Descartes today is already in your spam box. Descartes is already something the algorithms are learning to avoid because people hate Descartes. The last example of Descartes is marketing guys who try to force you to consume their marketing messages, and you just put ad blockers against them. And the ad blocker is the perfect metaphor for trying to block the Cartesian individual from ever interfering in your life ever again. You don't want them any longer. We're tired of them. It's a dead religion. It's over. So if Nietzsche killed the Protestant God, one of my mentees, Mike Enochson, brilliant young Swedish Marxist, he said it yesterday. He said, why do people believe Nietzsche was an atheist? That they haven't even read Nietzsche and understood him. No, because Nietzsche kills his own father's Protestant God. He basically leads Christianity from on the forward to a corrupt Catholicism, which then results in a Protestantism, which results in somebody being literate, being able to read the sacred text for themselves, and thereby beginning to believe that they as individuals have a direct contact with God, identifying with the Christ figure, and suddenly realizes this is dead and over. This God cannot survive. This is just a God for the meek. This is not a heroic God. So Nietzsche understands that Christianity is doomed, and it was built into the religion because it lacked the phallic. Christianity was never a military religion. That speaks volumes. It was never a religion for men. It was always a religion about the child and the mother. The delivery station.
And the man is crucified, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, he's not even a man. He's a youngster. Do you think Jesus even was allowed to have sex before he was crucified? Well, if he was, then that would be against St. Augustine's and St. Paul's fantasies to begin with. So obviously these are Gnostics and Platonists who love Jesus to die as a virgin on a cross. That means you walk into Christian church, you see the Virgin Mary and the Jesus child, and then you see the youngster on the cross with his mother next to him. You see mother, son, mother, son, mother, son, mother, son. The father is absent already in Christianity from the very beginning because the father has become the state. He's outside of the religion.
That's very interesting.
That is the full Nietzschean take. That not even Nietzsche dared to make, but that's the full Nietzschean take on the death of God. The death of the individual is Michel Foucault's great contribution in the 1960s and the 1970s, and even said the death of man. He said the death of man is just the complementary product to the death of God, because once God is dead, then the guy who invented that God, the individual, the Cartesian individual, is what Foucault kills. And he kills him by exposing he as a sort of Freudian Jungian character, driven by his own subconsciousness, driven by his own shadows, about, looking for submission and everything everywhere, the way humans really are. Like Foucault exposes our full-on humanity, and there's nothing there to idealize, right? So this infantile caricature of a man that comes forward in Foucault's work is then the death of the individual. Now, what we're doing now, Söderqvist not least, is that we're going after the death of the child God. We're going after the idea that anybody can have instant access to anything. You cannot have instant access to grace and mercy, as Christianity promised you. Christianity is the cheapest fucking religion. It's the McDonald's of religion. Hey, you can do whatever you like in Battlefield Club. As long as you ask Jesus for forgiveness, you're fine. Well, no, you're not. Causes have effects, right? It's not that easy. Come on, for God's sake. And at least the Muslims and the Jews are not that naive. But, no, you cannot escape.
Killing the child in the religion, the idea that the child can be, somehow a vessel of the divine or whatever, like a Greta Gunberg type of.
You know what's the scary thing with Greta Thunberg? Not about her, like the kid.
No,
What's scary about the projections onto her is that the projections that are being thrown at her are basically as if she was an older dominatrix whipping you.
But I felt that as well.
Old and asexual.
You should be ashamed. It's like there's a perversion, there's a sadomasochistic quality to that.
And the pedophilia, which is unique. We haven't had pedophilia in culture before anywhere. Pedophilia, so mass spread today in the West, is of course again a result of the idea that children are innocent and have instant access to grown-up sexuality.